All right, hello. It's Ethan Alexanian here again. Uh, yeah. The last time I did an interview without a show, it was with this man I'm talking to again today, and he's back. And this time I've actually got a proper introduction for him. And how do you introduce a man who's done so much? So I'll take a whack at it. He's a broadcasting legend who started back in 1970 on Radio 1, and he's hosted shows like Sounds of the 70s, Old Grey Whistle Test, and now The Country Show with Bob Harris, which you can hear on Thursdays at 9 p.m. on Radio 2, or on the BBC Sounds app or website anywhere around the world. He's been given an OBE, a Mojo Medal, CMA International Broadcaster of the Year Awards, and he's the man who taught me how to correctly pronounce the name of the DRAM label. Would you please give a warm welcome to Whispering Bob Harris?
Hello, Ethan. How are you doing?
I'm doing grand today. How are you?
Yeah, very good. We're both. I got my second jab the other day. You just heard you're getting your first jab, so things. This cliche of the light at the end of the tunnel is becoming a bit of a reality, and it's not an oncoming train.
Yeah. Well, just one step closer to not being in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So, right off, I kind of introduced you as Whispering Bob. Does it get annoying at all having that be kind of your almost official title?
No, absolutely the opposite. I love it because it narrows it down quite considerably. Uh, there are a lot of Bobs in the world, and it's interesting actually. If you analyze the name Bob, generally when you're watching films, if there's a sort of fairly kindly character, the chances are his name is Bob. there's a nice sort of tone to it, but there are a lot of Bobs in the world. But once you go Whispering Bob, it narrows it down very, very considerably. So I've always liked it. Actually, I still do.
Well, it's fitting that, the kindly people with the name Bob, because you're legendarily one of the kindest people in the British entertainment business. And I know that firsthand because I've talked to you before. Um, Actually, I've got another kind of question about that. So you gained the reputation as Whispering Bob. Did the soft-spoken nature just come to you naturally, or was that something you had to work towards?
Well, I started in radio, and my whole ambition was to be in radio. I honestly didn't ever give any thought to the idea that perhaps I might finish up on television. Um, but I did. And I was, whereas with radio, I always felt completely comfortable on radio. I felt like I'd prepared myself all my life to be in that studio behind that microphone. With television, I was literally starting to learn as I went along. It's a big job to learn in front of a lot of people. And so to start with, I was even quite intimidated by being in a television studio and knowing that you've got, I don't know, a million of people watching you. And I retreated back into myself a little bit. So it's partly that, but it was also the idea that I wanted to try and make television as intimate as radio can be, that very one-to-one. So I encourage the idea. It's close. It's quiet. It's us. It's a club. So there was a journalist from the Melody Maker, which was one of the big music papers in Britain at the time, who came to review. I think it's probably about the third or fourth edition of the program that I presented. And he was very aware of the fact that, even standing across a few yards away in the studio, he could hardly hear me. So when he wrote the piece, he described me as being Whispering Bob Harris. And there we are. That was the moment, and it's stuck ever since.
So, and of course, the television program you're referring to is the legendary Old Grey Whistle Test, is it?
Yes, it is, yeah.
How did you get the job on the Whistle Test? Because you'd been doing shows on Radio 1, like Sounds of the 70s, for maybe a year or two before that, correct?
Yeah. Well, I was co-founder. It was, almost by accident, really, but I was co-founder of Time Out magazine with Tony Elliott. Tony got this idea for initially a one-off poster magazine for the underground in London, the counterculture, as we always thought of ourselves as being. And there wasn't really anything that provided any real information about that world in London at the time. There were two much older magazines called Where to Go in London and What's On in London, but neither of them listed, what was happening at Middle Earth or UFO Club at Tottenham Court Road or anything like that, or where Pink Floyd were playing that night. So we started that magazine to fulfill that demand, really. It was a sort of, meeting point of lots of strands of the counterculture at the time. And even actually when we got the magazine established, the first offices we moved into were in Princedale Road in Holland Park in London. And there was even a little sort of mini counterculture there, because we were a few doors down from Oz magazine, very famous and controversial magazine at the time, and the company Release, which was a sort of drug advice bureau run by Caroline Coon. So they were at 52. I think Oz was at 56. And we're at number 70, Princedale Road. And above us was a company called Black Hill Enterprises, who were the management company for Pink Floyd. And so, we saw a lot of the band. We saw the band regularly sort of hanging out. And this was just in the last sort of few months of Syd Barrett being with the band and David Gilmour taking over. So it was a really amazing thing, to kind of use journalism, which I was doing, as a bridge into the music industry and across into radio. So, as part of the sort of journalist side of my of what I was doing at the time, I got to fulfill a massive ambition, and I interviewed John Peel, very famous English DJ at the time. And
when I think of
Mark
the classic era of great
Yeah.
British DJs, I think of you and I think of John Peel, and I also think of like Kenny Everett.
Yes. Well, John was on this station called Radio London. Kenny was as well. And John was doing this very late night show called The Perfume Garden, which was it was a hippie free form, basically. Poetry, bits, letters, the incredible string band, Donovan. It was a beautiful program, and I loved it. And I loved listening to John. It was the first time I'd really heard anybody. I knew I wanted to DJ, but John was the guy who pressed all the buttons and who made it real for me. That I could do that, actually. That if I were doing a program right now, I'd be doing what John does. So I really wanted to meet him, and I got to meet him, and we became friends. And he then began, obviously, to learn from me my ambition to get on the radio. And he introduced me to a producer at the BBC called Jeff Griffin, who was producing some of John's shows. And there was a long lead into this, but eventually John put me onto the radio, sitting in for John. When he went away on holiday, Jeff gave me 4 programs to just show what I could do, really. And that's what led to me getting a regular Sounds of the 70s program. So Mike Appleton, who was the producer of the Old Grey Whistle Test, the criteria that he was applying to the presentation of Whistle Test was he wanted a journalist who could broadcast, because there's a lot of research involved with, you're doing research on the band you're introducing, you're doing research on the person you're interviewing, you're going to be writing your script yourself. So that was the combination he wanted, a journalist who could broadcast. And having started Time Out and done all that journalistic work, and then found myself on Radio 1, I was that journalist who could broadcast. So when Richard Williams decided after the first series that he wanted to stop, Mike gave me a call and said, would I like to do the show? Very long answer to it. But
I would
that
take
that
long
was
answers any day of the week. I love people want to hear you talk, Bob. You mentioned his name, and I actually had a question about him, so I feel like this is a perfect way to kind of segue into that. One of the most interesting sessions he ever did for Sounds of the 70s, in my opinion, was never actually broadcast, if I'm not mistaken. The mythical now Syd Barrett did a spot on Sounds of the 70s. What was that experience like, dealing with a later period Syd Barrett?
well, funnily enough, actually, then it was broadcast, and I'm here in my sort of workshop. Let me just see if I can show you. These are scripts and running orders and stuff from the past, and this whole idea of wait, when was the last Syd Barrett broadcast came up just the other day, and I found the running order for it. Whether I can go back straight to it, I'm not sure. Just see. But no, I was hoping I might be able to. No, this is the way the old Sounds of the 70s running orders used to look. And you open it up, and who did I open the show with? Oh, Foghat, and then Dave Evans, and then Richard Thompson. That was on the 26th of June, 1972. So I got all these around me, and I looked up the Syd Barrett one, and he played, I think it was 3 songs from an album that he was talking about, but I don't think the album ever came out. I think it was sort of that way around. But certainly, these were the very last things that Syd Barrett broadcast before it all sort of fell away, So, yeah, if I could put my hand on it, I would, but I just can't find it, Ethan. But it was fascinating to find it, I must say.
What do you remember about Syd from that time?
Well, he was he was very quiet, I think, in a world of his own. I think probably that's the best way to describe it. I mean, it was 50 years ago now, more actually, when I first met him in 68. So that's 53 years ago. And I remember he was sitting in reception at Black Hill Enterprises above us at Time Out, just sitting there, just sort of watching the world go by, very quiet. And on the odd occasions that I did see him, even when he came in to do the session for Sounds of the 70s, my one memory of it was that everyone was sort of coaxing the music out of him. Do you know what I mean? It was so, yeah.
Well, the interviews I've heard from Dave Gilmour talking about that period in his life, that seems to be a kind of reoccurring theme, having to coax the music out of him.
Mm.
Now on to a bit of a more fun note. You're a big fan of the London American label, and I think that's been well established.
Yes.
And last time you were on the show, you casually mentioned, which has been one of the greatest moments of my show, the name drop of Robert Plant and the game you play with him. Guess the London American catalog number.
Yes.
So, with that being said, I have prepared a mini version of this game, if you would like to play.
Oh, God. Oh, my God. Go on.
Okay, first one. From 1958, 45 HLD 8584.
Oh, gosh.
I can give an additional hint, if you would like.
Go on.
It was originally released in the United States on the Cadence label.
So it's an Everly Brothers, Till I Kissed You.
It is not.
Problems.
It is not the Everly Brothers.
Oh, it's not the Everly Brothers. Well, on Cadence. Gosh, who would it be then? It wouldn't. Would it be Link Ray and Rumble?
It would not be Link Ray and Rumble.
So then, who else was on? The Andrews Sisters.
I'll give you a hint. It's a type of sweet.
It's a type of sweet. Oh God, Ethan, am I being completely dumb?
The name of the song is Lollipop by the Chordettes.
The Chordettes. Okay.
Okay, this one might be a little easier. Did I completely overshoot the runway with this game? Let's try another one. Okay, 45 HLU 9149.
God, I don't know this one either. So this would be about, this is 1960.
It is
Yes.
1960, and this will be a bigger hint. It was originally released in the United States on the Monument label.
So it's Roy Orbison.
It is Roy Orbison.
And I'm guessing I Need the Lonely.
It's Only the Lonely. Did I pick a predictable one?
No. Be predictable. This is good. One more.
Okay. 45 HLK 9358.
Well, that'll be Stand By Me.
That would be Stand By Me. And what an interesting way to segue the show. Now, last time I had you on, you were... The song had just been released, and there was talk of an upcoming vinyl issue of the record.
Ta-da!
Ta-da as well. I've got a copy too.
Yeah. What I do, actually, I don't know about you, Ethan, with the old singles, but I square them up in the cover. So the label is square. So you look at it and you're not sort of doing this to read it. Do you do
don't
the
worry,
same?
I do that too.
Yeah. Did you get a signed copy?
I unfortunately did not get a signed copy.
Well, we'll have to see what we can do about that then.
Oh?
Because you can't not have a signed copy. I've got about 3 left, so...
Oh?
Email me your address afterwards, and then we'll take it from there.
Bob, my day is getting better and better. First out, I find I'm getting the COVID shot. Next, Whispering Bob is trying to send me a signed thing. But I actually also had something. You were showing the sounds of the 70s, work orders and, running order sheets. I've seen on your online shop recently, is it fair to say you've been digging through the archives?
Yeah. Hence I'm sitting here surrounded by it all. Because I've got this fantastic site now, which has been developed by a company called 3B Digital. And it's run by brothers, Alex and Jack. And they and I become really good friends. Alex and I in particular, we are on Zooms together a lot. And the work they put in to bring my site alive is just absolutely incredible. And for Alex, it's a bit of a labor of love because he we first got in touch with him as a listener to my show. It was he asked me to play a track at a certain time. This is years ago. And I think I heard from him first as a DM on Twitter. So I got a message saying, "Will you follow me?" And I followed him. And he got in touch to say, would I play this track, which I did. It was, both of us went down a Since I Met You, Baby road. And he'd come up with a version because I loved a version of that song by Black Joe Lewis, and I was playing it on my shows all the time. And as a complete contrast to that, he discovered a version by Dean Martin, which I also played. So anyway, that was the original contact between us. And then much later, he got in touch and said, "What's happened to your website? It's disappeared." And I said, "Yeah, the guy who was running it for me is retired now." So he's sort of basically kind of closed the site. My son Miles had done just a one-page, almost sort of holding site. But Alex said that he would love to rebuild my site and reestablish the archive. And that's what he's done. He and his company spent months on it. And it looks fabulous. And we decided I'd also had some archiving done on my side of things. And I was talking to a chap in England called Clive Tilsey. He's a soccer commentator. And he was beginning to sell what he called his commentary charts. all the charts of the players and the stats and everything that he compiles before the start of a game. And I thought that's kind of like a playlist. So Alex said, why don't we open up a store? And of course, we had Stand By Me. It was obviously important for us to have somewhere that people could go to buy Stand By Me, and somewhere from where we could promote it. So we opened up the store, and I put some playlists in there. Some of these handwritten ones, Ethan, these I think it's kind of like history in real time, if you know what I mean.
Incredible.
Yeah. This is when Tipex was a thing. Yeah. So these running orders, we feel that they've got a value, and we felt in the same way that Clive feels about his commentary charts, that if you've got a date in your life and you want it marked in some way with a playlist or something from that anniversary, then we've almost certainly got one from your date, as it were. So that was the idea of opening in the store, and it's going really well now. So,
well, you had mentioned earlier in the show talking about John Peel's show on Radio London, and I was actually going to ask you, how do you feel that the pirate stations in the 60s have shaped modern radio as it is now?
Profoundly. In a word, we wouldn't have probably taken the route we've taken without them. I'm not sure where we would be, really. But, when the pirate radio stations started in the 60s, everything coincided, everything converged at that moment. In 62, 3, 4, really, we were finally coming out of the austerity of the post-war years and the 50s. The 50s, rock and roll was the first blast of sort of teenage energy. We hadn't seen anything like rock and roll before. And so this new generation started to emerge, teenagers with their own ideas, their own identities. And as we went into the 60s, the sort of black and white 50s really did flourish into the color of the 60s. It was amazing how it happened. By the time we got to 66, it felt to us in the UK that for a moment, at the very least, we were the center of everything. We had such great music. We would the fashion in London, the Mary Quants and people, the models, Jean Shrimpton, Twiggy, the films, Blow Up, the bands, specifically to London, people like Eric Clapton with the Yardbirds, the Rolling Stones, the Small Faces. It was an incredible moment. And so reflecting all of that with the pirate stations, they didn't have any kind of restriction on them at all. There was a big restriction on the BBC in terms of how many records it could play every day, because the Musicians' Union were very powerful and insisted that there was a huge amount of live material on the radio at that time.
They could only play about, an hour of recorded music a day on light entertainment. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, even when I started on Sounds of the 70s, the 1 hour show that I did, there was only 20 minutes needle time allowed in that show at that time. It was good in so much as we then had a lot of sessions, so we were able to discover and then play a lot of live music, which was great. But overall, it was pretty inhibiting. And certainly, 64, 65, when all the British bands had absolutely exploded onto the scene, the fact that the BBC was hardly really playing them, and what you would hear is awful dance band cover versions of, I don't know, the Ticket to Ride by the Beatles or something. But the pirate radio stations didn't have any of those restrictions at all, and they were playing the hottest records, sometimes weeks before they first came out. I remember hearing Substitute by The Who about a month before it came out. And you're hearing those records in real time. That excitement is happening around you in real time. It was incredible. So when the the Marine Offences Act came in. That's what it was called, because the government, heavily lobbied by the general music industry, couldn't control the pirates. So eventually they shut them down. And the government felt that it had to offer something, because now, you know, the whole idea of this incredible radio, all the kids are listening to these amazing radio stations, Radio London, Radio Caroline. So the BBC started Radio 1, and a lot of the DJs that were on the pirate ships, when they came off the pirates, went to Radio 1.
Tony Blackburn.
Yeah. Eventually Johnny Walker, John Peel. They all went to Radio 1. And although Radio 1 was still restricted by the limit on needle time, it represented a huge sea change for the BBC. And then it gradually became, you know, more the Radio 1 we know now. And that then obviously influenced all the other commercial radio stations that followed. So without the pirates, I'm not really sure what direction radio in the UK would have taken.
You mentioned their name, and typically what I normally host is a very Beatles-centric show. So I feel like I should meet my normal quota for my listeners and ask you, when was the first time that you heard the Beatles?
Well, literally when I first heard Love Me Do. I was living in Northampton. I mean, I wasn't living in London, and I wasn't in any kind of hip situation. I was hearing stuff on the radio just like anybody else. And there was a great station called Radio Luxembourg that beamed in.
Well, you presented on Radio Luxembourg for a while.
I did a few years later. Yeah, I did. I mean, the signal came from a tower in the Duchy of Luxembourg right across Europe, and it would phase in and out at night. The reception was awful, but at least it was sort of back-to-back pop music. But the first time I heard Love Me Do was when it went into the charts in, what would it have been, October 1962, and was played on a program called Pick of the Pops. And the thing that struck me about it was that the harmonica on it, there'd been a hit a bit earlier that year by Bruce Chanel called Hey Baby. And the harmonica on Hey Baby and the harmonica on Love Me Do are so similar. The sound is almost identical. It wasn't until a bit later that I discovered that the Beatles had toured with, what's his name? Who had the big hit with it? Not Gene Chandler. It'll come to me in a sec. Anyway, they'd toured together. Bruce Chanel, that's who it was. Funnily enough, Delbert McClinton was the harmonica player on Hey Baby, and Delbert McClinton is a very, this is my cat Colby. Delbert McClinton is a very important figure these days in the Americana scene in Nashville.
Which of course, that's the world you've been living in for the past while. Yeah. I'm sorry. Colby's not allowed on the table anymore because of all the memorabilia. And I had this horrible feeling of him coming in from outside with muddy paws and walking all over valuable running orders and scripts and stuff. But that's just how cats are.
I know.
So this brings us to the part of the show. It's always my least favorite where we have to say goodbye. I thank you so much, Bob, for coming on the show.
Oh, well, as last time, Ethan, I've really enjoyed it. It's been great. I wish the weather would warm. What's the temperature where you are?
I think it might be above freezing today.
Right. Where are you exactly in that case?
I am in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada.
Right. So you must be north of Toronto.
Just slightly south of Toronto, about an hour.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. So it's still that cold then?
Yeah. It's been all right since spring started, but it's just we've had quite a bit of cold lately.
Yeah. Seems everywhere. Nashville's colder than normal. We are here colder than normal. So
there you go.
That's the thing about us. us Brits, we love talking about the weather.
Oh, us Canadians love it too. It gives us an excuse to complain.
Yeah, yeah.
Is there
No,
anything
it's
else
been
you'd
great.
like
Thank you
to?
very much, Ethan.
Is there
I
anything
really
else you'd like
appreciate it.
to, mention before we sign off?
I'm just trying to think. Well, I think, okay, we should maybe do this even one more time in about a month or so.
Even
Because,
better.
yeah, because I've got an announcement to make. And so maybe it brings with it some news that we could discuss next time round.
Fabulous. Does that mean I'm going to have round 3 with Bob Harris?
It could well be, yes, if you're up for that.
I have to say, though, so many people have asked me about the interview we did back in the fall. And hopefully you don't mind, I've been exclusively referring to you as my friend Bob Harris.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, my buddy Bob.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but I've had a blast, Bob.
Excellent, Ethan. Well, let's talk again soon. And meanwhile, I'll buzz the Stand By Me in the post to you, signed this time.
Perfect.
All right.
And
talk soon.
Talk soon. And to everyone else out there, thank you for listening. You can go home now.